Welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello friends, today on the show, he's an Emmy-nominated actor, director, and playwright, and for over 50 years has been performing in movies, television, and on the stage. Some of you may know him as the Scorpio killer from the 1971 classic film Dirty Harry. The rest of you will know him as Elim Garak, the beloved Cardassian Tailor from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. In addition to his extensive acting credits, he's also had an amazing career on stage, is a published author, and also spent 15 years as the director of the Master of Fine Arts program at the University of Southern California, where now, after recently retiring, he is Professor Emeritus of Theater. He's funny and kind and a passionate artist who loves his craft. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show my friend, Andy Robinson. Andy, how are you doing?
Thank you for that generous intro, Daniel. I'm well.
It's really great to see you and to talk to you in this new generation of remote podcasting because of Corona.
Yeah, it's a brave new world, isn't it?
So, Andy, I want to jump in with your childhood. You had a much different childhood than most people. I know from your bio and stuff that you lost your dad to World War II when you were only 3 years old, and then your family moved to Hartford, Connecticut. And I was wondering, what do you remember about those early days of your life?
It was, oh boy, vivid memories, really vivid memories of Hartford, Connecticut in the 40s, and until I left Hartford in 1952 when I was sent away to the school. And these are memories in black and white because it was a world just obviously coming out of this cataclysm, and a lot of people, lost family.
And was your father a soldier in the war?
Yes, he was. My father was a paratrooper with the 101st Airborne, and he was killed at the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes Forest in the winter of 44-45, when the Germans were making their last offensive surge, and they thought they could just use that alley through the woods to get back into France and to disrupt the Allied advance.
Wow! And so, did your mom was she able to regale you with stories about your dad, and do you know what traits you have that are like him?
Well, this is one of the problems, Daniel. My mother, she fell apart. And I don't know what the hell to call it, whether it's, a nervous breakdown. Certainly that was part of it. Her nerves, just were shot. She really began drinking seriously. I mean, the whole experience with losing my father, her husband, and the dislocation at the end of the war, there were troops coming back into the States, and there was this incredible movement of people. And my mother decided at that point, because she was so, deeply disturbed by what had happened, she decided that she was we were at the time living in New York, where I was born, and where my parents had been living before, he went to war. And so we got on these trains, and she was looking for friends, and went out to the West Coast and to New Mexico, and then losing trunks. She had 2 trunks because she just took everything with her for some reason. And in those trunks, both my parents were writers, and there were novels that they had written and short stories. And all that stuff was lost. Everything was lost. And it was almost like she was just uprooting herself. And in a sense, trying to just expunge everything that had happened before and start again. But of course, that didn't happen. We came back to Hartford, and quite frankly, it was a dismal time between then and several years later, when the state decided that they had to take me away from her and send me to essentially it wasn't a reform school, although that was in consideration because I was in a lot of trouble.
Now, is this St. Andrews you're talking about?
Yeah, this is when I was sent. Yeah. And St. Andrews at that time, it's a very different school now. But at that time, it was a church industrial school. It was supported by the Episcopal Charities of New England. Yeah. And it was a school for kids, quote unquote, from broken homes.
And there's on your Wikipedia page, it says you were a juvenile delinquent and that's why you were sent to this school. But is that true? Like, did you have behavioral issues because of all this stuff going on?
Yeah, I was I was in trouble a lot, and basically I went to juvenile court a couple times.
What kind of stuff did you get up to?
I mean, it was like, when you think of what's going on these days, I mean, it was just, vandalism, random vandalism, theft, sneaking into seeing an open window, and just thoughtless shit.
Yeah.
And basically also being a truant from school, but generally I was like, I was disturbed myself, and it's amazing. And I was on the street a lot. And we were on the street a lot because there were times when, my mother she would do odd jobs, cleaning hotel rooms, or, I mean, she had these jobs and then she'd quit, and then we'd have no money and we'd get kicked out of these rooming houses, and there, yeah, it was like pretty dismal.
Is there any kind of a happy ending to that story with your mom? Did she eventually find some peace? And
I don't think she ever found peace, but she did eventually over the course of the years, because we separated, and I had to get away from her. St. Andrews was a godsend, that was the beginning of it. And then I tried getting back into relationship with her, and that was dicey. And then at one point I just decided, screw it, that's it. I can't do this anymore. But then eventually, and it was mainly because of Irene, my wife Irene. And Irene said, no, she's your mother. And so Irene was the one who really reached out to her. And when Agnes tried to basically commit suicide by drinking, I had to go back to. I went back to Hartford, and I brought her back to Los Angeles.
oh wow, what was it like for you going back to Hartford? How long had it been?
It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was Jesus. It was horrible because it was a place I never wanted to go back to. Remember, as I said, after the war, I mean, Hartford. It was an insurance city, insurance companies, and these big, ugly buildings where Aetna and so forth, and it was a depressed city. And it's not a pretty city. It wasn't a pretty city to begin with, and especially if you're on the bottom rung of the social ladder, it was really. And just wandering the streets, and it was. To me, it was like hell.
When was the last time you were back there?
Just before my grandfather died, and he died in 1970 something. Irene and I think in the mid-'70s, and we were in New York. I was doing a soap opera in New York, Ryan's Hope. And we brought Rachel up, and when she was a baby, to see my grandfather.
Yeah.
Because I wanted him to see her, and that was the last time.
Now, when all this was going on after your dad passed away and your mom's going through all this stuff, where were the grandparents? Were they not able to help out during all this?
It was just my grandfather left. My father's side of the family, because my mother was a communist. She was a card-carrying communist.
Oh, wow.
And she married a guy who was a Harvard graduate from a New England Republican family. And he was a Roosevelt Democrat, which was bad enough for the family. But the fact that he married a commie, and she was active. She brags about, having copies of the Daily Worker in the baby carriage with me on top of it and passing it out to, people on the street and down. And she especially worked with longshoremen.
Today, she'd be a Bernie Sanders supporter.
Absolutely. And as am I, and I come by it honestly.
Yeah.
Then after, when Willie, my father, was killed, his family, they tried to get in touch with Agnes and me, but she wanted nothing to do with them. Nothing to do with them. It was part of her just erasing the past.
Wow.
And after a while, they gave up. And so I did not see a Robinson until. It was so funny. I did a film about Liberace, a TV film on ABC, and I played Liberace. And as part of the promotion, I was on Good Morning America, and I was interviewed. And after that, I got a letter from my uncle, my father's brother, Neil Robinson, wanting to make contact. And I wrote back to him. I said, "Oh, this is lovely. Yeah, I'd like to make contact, but can I ask you why now? Why do you contact me now?"
Yeah.
And it's not as if, ever since Dirty Harry, I've been out there. He said, well, because in that interview, you seem like such a nice guy, which was a kind of lame thing. But then,
Still very nice.
but it was nice, and we got together, and he was a lovely man, and he finally admitted how guilty he had been all these years, and in tears. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. We were someplace.
Oh, we had originally talked about where the grandparents were. You said it was just your granddad, and yeah.
Oh yeah, so yeah, that was it. And then I got to meet other Robinsons who were mainly in Maine, and it was funny seeing. And I was invited to this family reunion. And Irene and I walked into this family reunion, and I'm looking at these people, and I'm thinking, Jesus, these people look like me. You know? It's very, very weird.
That's cool. Well, so you growing up with this juvenile delinquent behavior, which I think is very understandable because of the circumstances you were going through, of course. But is there any kind of rebellious nature to you that carried throughout your life?
Always. Yeah, I got into a lot of trouble. And I got in different kinds of trouble, like, I'm like my mother in regard. My mother did not suffer fools, and that's been hard for me. And these days, I really have to keep my mouth shut because it's like, there are fools abounding.
You and I have that in common. We'll go into situations and there'll be someone doing or saying something, and Jolene will just reach over and gently squeeze my hand, which is the, you need to keep your mouth shut at this point notification.
Yes, I get the same squeeze from Irene. Yeah, but in my career, it hurt because if you're an actor and you have problems with authority, that created a lot of problems for me. I was always, a good-looking guy, young guy, ambitious, but I was not easy to work with, in terms of a director giving me directions, especially if I thought their direction was not helpful.
Now, did this carry through to Star Trek and everything as well?
No. By the time I got to Star Trek, I was cool. Irene, over the years, Irene has helped me work this out. But certainly before, I met Irene, and after the Dirty Harry experience, Dirty Harry, that experience was great because I loved the director, this guy Don Siegel, who was brilliant. And you'd have to be a fool not to realize that you're working with a brilliant director. But then most directors aren't brilliant. And so after Dirty Harry, there were two things that were really difficult. One was the fact that I was typecast as a crazy killer. And it pissed me off. And then the other thing was the jobs I got as sort of like weak carbon copies of the Scorpio killer were as crazy killers and with weak directors. Or I don't mean that as a value judgment. They were perfectly nice people, but they weren't Don Siegel.
Yeah.
And of course, I thought, well, what the hell? Jesus, anyway. So yeah.
Well, that actually had to be a little difficult, though. That like your major breakthrough role is with this really fantastically talented director. It's difficult to go into anything and have like the best of the best, and then have to go down pegs below that for other things. It's hard.
Also to be relegated to a meathead murderer, and all the roles I got. At least Dirty Harry, was a genuine piece of art. It was crafted. You see that film today on a big screen, and it's epic. Whether or not a lot of people were upset by its politics or its perceived politics, but still, as a piece of cinema, it was amazing.
Well, Andy, on the personal side, you've been married for 50 years this year, correct?
50 years last March, the last month.
First of all, Mazel Tov. That's amazing.
It is amazing.
How did you guys actually meet?
Oh man, it's an amazing story because I'd found my footing as an actor. I'd gone through drama school, came back wanting to be a great Shakespearean actor, worked in repertory theater for a couple of years, came to New York after 2 years, got an off-Broadway show, a lead that my friend Stacy Keach helped me, was playing the lead in, and then got fired and fell apart. I lived downtown, down in the East Village, and I got involved with the La Mama Theater Company, and that became my home for several years, doing experimental downtown theater.
Wow, cool.
And so I was doing a play that I had written at La Mama. It was the last night, it was the last show, and my friend Stacy came with some friends and said, after the show, they said, "Well, there's a party uptown. Do you want to come with us?" And I didn't want to because it was our last show that night, and I wanted to hang out with my friends at our, cast party, whatever you want to call it. But they brought along this beautiful woman, not Irene, another woman by the name of Yafa. And I thought, oh, I was really torn between, turning them down and going to my party and, going to their party. So I decided what I would do. I made a compromise. I would get in the cab with them because the party was all the way uptown. And I would know by the time we got uptown whether or not this was going to work out. Well,
That's a smart move.
I knew it wasn't going to work out even before we got to Times Square. But I just couldn't get out of the cab and say, well, it was nice riding in the cab with you and hitch another ride back downtown. So I decided that I would go up to the party and just sort of make a quick tour, which is, I've done many times in my life, and then just sneak out and then go back downtown. Well, on my quick tour, I ran into this presence, this beauty, and the rest is history.
Did you ask her out that night?
We stayed up to about 5 o'clock in the morning talking, and then when we made a date for the next night, and after that next night, we had never left each other.
That's amazing. Is there something in particular that made you fall in love with her?
Oh man, it's mysterious, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's mysterious why we fall in love with certain people, and when you get that coup de foudre, when you hit with that thing.
That's awesome. I have some family friends who have also been married 50 years. And when I ask them, how did you make 50 years last and you're still happy, they still love each other, the husband turned and looked at me and just very simply said, friendship, not ownership.
I think that's beautiful, actually.
Yeah,
I
do
think
too.
that's a beautiful way of putting it. I mean, for us, and this is not a secret, but for us at one point, because we hit very rocky patches, and especially as you can imagine, being an actor with there were times when it was pretty lean, and at one point we just looked at you then, and I think it was Irene that said to me, said, "Okay, this is the deal. We agree that we don't leave, we stay," and because always in our relationships, this was Irene's third marriage, this was my second marriage. Always before, there was always the exit. Oh, this isn't working. I'm leaving. And so and when both of us recognized that was, both of us were holding out that option, that we decided that option had to be dropped. We stay.
I think that's great. And obviously it's worked.
It has worked. It has worked. And it's like, I cannot tell you, this is a relationship that is, I don't think I'd be alive today. I don't think I'd be sane as I am today.
I feel the same way about Jolene, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a life, and it's been a great life.
The thing is, this generation today is like you said, with that exit strategy, they're always very quick to go, well, if it's not her or him, it's going to be someone else. There's plenty of fish in the sea. And they don't have that ideal that marriage and long-term relationships are not always amazing. There are difficult times. There are financial difficulties sometimes. There are emotional difficulties. There are things you have to overcome as a couple. This millennial generation of always having to have instant gratification, they're taking that into their relationships, unfortunately. And if it's not happy all the time, they'll just switch to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And it saddens me a bit because I think the value in being committed to someone and actually dedicating yourself to that person and seeing what you can achieve together, if it's the right person, and that's the big caveat, but if it's the right person, it's an incredibly beautiful thing
But
that you...
the thing about relationships, for me, and this is just for me, is that you run into the same problems all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm dealing with the same issues because of who I am. I have my issues. I have my emotional challenges, let's say, that I've had ever since I can remember. And I still have them. They're at a different level now. They move to another level, but they're still the same thing. And I found in relationships that when my issues, my buttons were pressed and my issues were sort of activated, I thought, well, it's because this relationship sucks and we're not right for each other, which may have been the case, absolutely. But often what it is that you are challenged by living in some kind of honest, authentic relationship where you are confronted with yourself in the other's eyes, where the other is the mirror of you. And it's almost like it's, what can't be said and can't be whistled either, but it has to be tried to say that you have to move past. You have to go through, you have to go into the mouth of the dragon. You have to deal with these issues and yourself vis-a-vis another person.
I think that's beautiful.
And if you can't do it, then the relationship is whatever it is, but it probably won't last. And if it does last, there is a compromise that's made, which is okay. But it's like we have to find the person that we can be ourselves with.
What did you guys do to celebrate 50 years together?
Well, it was pretty amazing because our daughter Rachel, at the time I was doing a play. We got just before everything shut down, and the last performance was on March 8th. Our anniversary is March 9th. So on March 8th, after our last performance was a matinee, we all thought, meaning the cast, we're going to go to a cast party at the director's house, who happens to be an old friend of mine from La Mama, Joel Zwick. And so we show up at the cast party, and it turns out that Rachel had contacted Joel and said, listen, can we make the cast party a combined cast party and celebration of Andy and Irene's 50th?
Oh, wow.
And so we walked into that party, and suddenly it looked like, remember that old show, This Is Your Life?
Yeah.
Where you walk on, and there's... from your school, there's your third grade teacher, and said, well, there are all these people. And at first there was this cognitive dissonance. And I'm thinking, what the fuck are you people doing here? Who? and then it was like it was brilliant. Rachel and her husband Joe and Joel Zwick, really pulled off an amazing event.
That's awesome.
That essentially we've been still riding on that wave since.
Are you guys planning on traveling anymore, or are you done traveling?
No, we'll travel.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to talk about travel a little later, but I'm curious, since we're talking about falling in love and those things, when did you think that you first fell in love with acting?
I don't know if it's falling in love, because acting has always been associated with such fear and trembling with me. It's a very scary thing, and it still is, for different reasons now. Can I remember the lines? That's one for my age now. But when I remember, I actually remember the first time I stepped on stage vividly. I was like 11 or 12 at the school.
The St. Andrews?
Yeah, St. Andrews. For this tiny little place, there was this guy who created this bona fide, serious drama program. And so there was a Christmas play I was in. And I remember just being scared shitless. I thought I was going to shit myself, But when I got out there, it was like a whole other thing. It was, because like anybody who's ever acted, you remember those before you become, professional. Those first times, it's that focus of attention on yourself, the lights, and because it's all so artificial. It's acting, it's theater, it's not real,
right?
And yet people are watching you. They're waiting for you to say and do something that merits their watching. And that's still the case today. Well, when you go into a theater, you want to fucking see something. You want to see somebody do something. You want to hear something that's going to make your presence, worthwhile. And of course, that will never change. So it's not necessarily love, but it's like this almost this sadomasochistic relationship. I never thought this is something I was going to do for a living.
Well, I know as friends, you and I have talked separately about Star Trek before, but I can't interview Elim Garak without asking some Deep Space Nine questions, or I'm going to get lynched by my fellow Star Trek fans on the podcast. So I've written up a few here, and hopefully, I'm hope some of them are new or unique. So.
I doubt it, but it's okay because and if they are, kudos, baby.
Well, I'm curious, was Garak being a tailor already a part of the character before you got the job, or did you have a hand in making that decision?
No, all those decisions were, made by the writers. Basically, Garak was always a guy who was on this space station who was purportedly a tailor.
Yeah.
But everybody knew that he was something else. And it was weird because it was almost like if a member of the Wehrmacht had gone to Jerusalem after World War II and set up a tailor shop. What the hell is this guy doing here?
Over the 7 years of the show, did you actually learn anything about tailoring and sewing?
No. No. Why would I? My God. No. I actually, but it's funny though. One of the few fond memories I have of me and my mother is that because we didn't have any money, we were very poor. And so the clothes that I had to make last. So my mother couldn't sew worth shit. So she would sew, and I remember one day saying, "Ma, let me try that. And I couldn't have been, what was I, 8, 9, 10 years old? She said, okay, there were 2 rips or tears or whatever. She says, I'll take one, you take the other. And so we did that, and mine was much better than hers. It was still butchery, but it was a lot better than hers.
I can never get pants off the rack to ever fit me correctly because I have a shorter inseam. So I actually bought a sewing machine like 5 years ago and took a class in just how to do basic hemming and stuff. I really did. And now it's great because I can buy anything from the store, and I just fix all my pants.
That's impressive, Dan.
Yeah. Now, I can't make you a suit or anything, but it's
wow.
Just a little trade to have on the side. Garak has some of the best quotes ever in Deep Space Nine history, and I just want to tell you that one of my favorites is this quote: "Lying is a skill like any other, and if you want to maintain a level of excellence, you have to practice constantly."
You know something? That people are constantly coming up with quotes from Garak, which I love. I have not heard that one for a long time.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Oh, no, that's great. And by the way, your sewing question is unique too. So, man, you're really, chugging along here. But that is a great quote, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
It is. Isn't that funny? Because, I guess, and some people are, you are right in our faces on television, are practicing, doing a lot of practicing, aren't they?
Yes, they are. I know you get this question all the time, but is The Wire your favorite episode?
Totally my favorite. Totally my favorite. Because, the thing is, you have a mother who's a drunk, and coming from an Irish, Danish family, there's a lot of drinking, a lot of drunks. And for a while, I tried to sort of go that route. And you see what addiction, of course, the addiction I experienced was alcoholism. But addiction is addiction. Mm-hmm. And that episode was so well written by this guy, Robert Wolfe. And also, I have to tell you, Daniel, that the script was so good. And Garak's journey in that script was so well written that I've never done any better work in my life than I did in that episode.
I'm curious how much of you is actually in Garak and vice versa.
So I've always been a bad liar. I tried practicing a lot when I was a kid, but I never got good at it. There was something about me that was transparent through no intent on my part to be transparent, because I was constantly trying to pass unnoticed or to pretend that I was somebody else. But Garak basically taught me how to lie, which was quite wonderful. But in terms of an acting skill, Garak required working from a subtext, almost completely from a subtext. Mm-hmm. when you're playing a character, every character has a subtext. We all have a subtext. We all have a subconscious river that's running through us and underneath us that people can't see, can't experience, and only we dip into. And half the time we don't even know what's in that river, and how we're functioning with our subconsciousness. But as an actor, you have to learn how to work with subtext, to work with our subconsciousness, because with great writing, the surface, the text is one thing, and great writers leave room for a subtext.
Absolutely.
In other words, they accept that we all are complicated people, and what we experience of each other on the outside is like the tip of the iceberg. So the thing is that for someone like Garak, I had to write a book about Garak because I really needed to find a substructure for this character, a deep consciousness of, because when you're offered a job on one of these shows, a Star Trek show or any science fiction, and you're playing an alien, what the hell is that?
Right.
I mean, what is a Cardassian? What is a Romulan? What's a Klingon, and so forth?
I'm curious, when you write a book, like you wrote your book, do you have to get permission from Paramount or CBS or to use the character?
Yeah, it started out as an actor exercise, and which I've done pretty much for every serious character I've ever played, where I write a bio for the character. So that the character, that I'm playing, the character is me. I'm the character, but I want to give myself different information to play from. It's not Andy from Hartford or New York or whatever. It's like
John from Kansas, whose dad was a truck
that's
driver
right, or
for
the
20
Scorpio
years.
killer who came back from Vietnam, really damaged and homicidal, that sort of thing. So, and then on top of that, with Star Trek, because Star Trek is the first show where I would be invited to conventions. And so I went to these conventions, early conventions, and I'd get questions, how long does it take to put your makeup on and so forth like that. And then I thought, well, this is kind of boring after a while. I mean, I'm kind of boring at these conventions. I go up there like a doofus and, oh yeah, well, and then this happened, that happened. And so then I thought, I'm going to do something else. So I took the bio that I was writing, Daniel, and I turned it into a diary. Garak's diary. And then I would go to these conventions and I would read from Garak's diary, which became very popular. I loved doing it.
That's cool.
And the folks who came to the convention, they also, for the most part, really enjoyed hearing these diaries. And then this one guy came up to me and said, David, I can't remember his last name, but he was a guy who had written Trek novels. And he said, you should send this as a proposal to Simon Schuster into the division that deals with the Trek stuff, and I did, and they accepted my proposal, and I wrote it.
That's fantastic. Well, I have to ask. I'm not trying to change the course here because I don't want to
change it.
The book's great. I have your book on my shelf, by the way. I bought it before I met you.
Did you really?
I really did. Yeah, I'll actually go get it when I get Jolene.
What compelled you to buy this book?
Well, first of all, Garak was together. So Jolene and I both grew up with Star Trek, and both of our dads, Star Trek was a big part of our lives. It was something we shared with them. And, obviously my dad's passed, but her dad's still alive and Star Trek's still a thing. We're talking about the new. Yeah. So it was such a bonding thing. And so with her and I, we bonded over Star Trek together, and we've watched all the series together over the years. We've rewatched them all together. We actually have a couple action figures just on our shelf of tchotchkes, and Garak is one of the action figures we have. I'll have to bring it over and have you sign it, actually.
Oh my God. That's absolutely. Be happy.
So I've been a comic book and novel, as a writer myself, I've been a lover of novels and comic books and stuff. So when I find out that there's extended story that's considered, part of the canon most of the time or whatever, then I'm interested in so when I found out there was a novel about Garak that tells more about his life, if any of it's actually true, then what a great opportunity to find more about this character. So it's cool.
The thing what's fun about the book is that because he's lying all the time, and especially like in The Wire, where he gives, umpteen versions of the same incident, I thought, no, in the book, I'm going to lay out the truth. I mean, you know what I mean. The truth of the
Yeah.
character. So that, which would be I thought would be a lovely contrast. But it's also, I wanted the truth of the character. That was the genesis of the idea. The spark of the idea was to have a foundational story for the guy that I could touch into, which again is the actor's, that's the actor's trick.
Yeah, and what a dream as an actor to have a role for that long that you have the
It
ability to
was
do all of that. I
such
mean,
a privilege. I mean,
yeah.
7 years. I'd never had that before. And 7 years as a recurring character. I cannot tell you, Daniel, how many times I've gone onto a set of a series, and the series regulars, and it would be the fourth or the fifth year or something. And how many of them were bored, that all the money in the world wasn't really doing much for them. They were now richer than God and doing the same thing, and sort of like, and some of them behaving really badly. And I must say, the writing on Deep Space Nine was so good that everybody, the regulars and the recurring characters, everybody came in and was happy to be there.
That's awesome.
Because it was kind of an adventurous thing.
Well, in season 4, your daughter Rachel got to star in The Visitor, which is considered by a lot of people to be one of the best episodes of the series.
Yeah.
I think it's a phenomenal episode as well. How did it make you feel to see your daughter on the show? I'm curious, did you get to work with her on the script beforehand, and did you get to see her performing?
No, she got the audition, and then I was out of it.
Interesting.
I stayed out of it.
Did you want to be like, let's run this together, we'll work on it?
Nope.
Yeah.
I stayed out of it, and I was so proud of her because she was so good. And
she's
but
great.
The thing is, it was such a perfect role for her
That's cool.
because she really is that person. I mean, she has that innocence and that beauty and that curiosity
That's awesome.
and that sensitivity. That's who Rachel is. It was a delight. Yeah.
That's awesome. One of the reasons I think that Star Trek actually endures is because the future that it shows for humanity is one that I think a lot of people would really like to see. I'm curious if you think that we will actually eventually get there.
Man, it's a race. I mean, personally, I feel we're at such a critical juncture right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a force out there that is not a life force.
No.
And there are a lot of us who do believe in life. And who do believe in, and I include, the Star Trek franchise, the people who watch Star Trek. I mean, who want to believe that that these stories that we tell, that we will endure, and we will get past, and that these problems will not bring us to our knees. But I don't know. I'm a very optimistic person, but I'm also kind of a realistic person, and it's like what's going on is so deeply disturbing.
It is. How would Garak feel about Donald Trump?
Oh, with absolute contempt, because he's a loser. He's a guy who was given $400 million and lost most of it. He doesn't know what he's doing. He shows his cards. His lies are really amateur night and Dixie.
Yeah.
I mean, no, this guy is a complete piker.
I have a couple more Star Trek questions I think are going to be unique. I'm hoping you will enjoy them. If you were going to host a book club at your house, Andy, which of the characters and which of the actors would you want to have at your house for a book club? Well, the people I have, that have remained friends, like, Siddig and Armin, and dear Renee, who just recently passed. That was so, oh God, that was a blow. Yeah.
And he'd been sick for a while, but man, he hung in, and he was, yeah, definitely. God, such a lovely, lovely spirit.
And then what about the characters?
Oh, the characters. Well, forget about Ducat,
He's a dick.
Yeah. But Kira was always, very fascinating. And basically Kira and Garak being sort of like natural antagonists. And yet, there was a thing about Kira that went deeper than just her politics. And Cisco. always. I mean, and the thing is that episode, Pale Moonlight, where basically Garak gives Cisco a lesson in realpolitik, essentially says, no, you have to kill these people. In order to solve the problem, you have to murder these people.
Is that the one where at the end you say you've basically saved the Alpha Quadrant and all these people, and all you've lost is a Starfleet captain's pride and this one person? Was that one?
Yes. Yeah, it's a beautiful episode, and Avery and I had such a great time. I mean, such a good man, and so interesting and so profound, and he was a race man. I mean, he was clearly cognizant of of what the history of this country and what's going on now in terms of race and what his part in it was and the responsibility he took as a black man in this business. This is a man who had to fight. At the beginning, had a very different look, and then at one point he wanted the goatee. And the shaved head, and the battle he had to put up to with the producers and the network to get that.
That's crazy to me, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the racism is so seeped into our institutions that, we want, if we're going to give a black man a lead and to become a captain, he has to be acceptable, because we need to sell tickets. And there are white people who are not going to want to watch a guy who looks like a revolutionary.
Well, I mean, because people are stupid, and that's what I've come to realize over my life. And but Hollywood also, certainly, it's weird. Hollywood will take a risk.
It's the thing is, it's greed. This is why Bernie is, it's greed.
No, and look at the Corona shopping and people taking everything off the shelves and not leaving any for anyone else. And it's yeah.
I know.
I have one more Star Trek question I hope is unique, and you've never been asked this before. You ready?
Okay.
If Elim Garak had a podcast, who would he want to interview?
Oh, boy.
Have you been asked that before?
No.
Yes.
That's extraordinary. The whole impeachment thing and the Ukraine thing. They're like people like Fiona Hill and the ambassador to Ukraine, but the people who decided that they were going to tell the truth. I mean, those are the people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Is there somewhere that you want to travel in your life that you've never been? Because I know you've traveled extensively.
We're kind of, in a sense, we're not as adventurous as we used to be. So, and especially later in our lives, we like going back to the places that we love, like
France,
Paris
yeah.
and to Scotland. When I was at drama school in London, there was a 3-week break, I think in the spring, where I hitchhiked up to the north of England and to Scotland. And there were a lot of magical places. I mean, going into the Highlands for the first time, that was like being on another planet. It was so extraordinary. But the place, and I think that this is kind of like what Tolkien may have used as where the hobbits lived, is the Lakes District in the northeast of England.
I know exactly the area you're talking about, and I told Jolene, no joke, that if I was going to retire somewhere and I had to choose right now, that's in the top 2 places I would choose.
There it is. I mean,
it's stunning.
It's so amazing. Yeah, so there it is. I mean, I know there are places that I wish maybe we had gone to, but not really. It's so funny. You realize I don't have a bucket list. Neither one of us have a bucket list. We accept what our experience has been, what we've seen and what we've done, and we also accept what we haven't done and what we haven't seen, and don't feel like we've been cheated or anything. Not at all, because I think we've been very fortunate.
Well, I have more questions if you're down, because I have some.
Go for it. You're the one who has to edit this sucker, so.
Oh, I don't mind. You've been on stage and screen, and you've published books. You've taught at a university. Is there anything career-wise that you haven't done that you always wanted to do?
No, not really.
That's amazing.
No, I mean, it's like the experience. I mean, those experiences. I just feel so fortunate. I feel blessed that I was able to do these things. And now, whatever happens, it's like gravy. For instance, the last play that I did was this lovely comedy that this young man, Matthew Levitt, had written, and that my friend Joel Zwick directed. And it was a really smart comedy that appropriate for our business and for our theater community here. And to play a role in which people laugh. I was very funny and people laughed. And I thought,
That's great.
wow, this is great, because ever since Dirty Harry, people have been, assumed that I'm this sort of like, heavy dramatic kind of actor. And I realized that probably I do comedy as well, if not better, than anything else.
That's awesome.
When I got out there and I started, because I created this character, this old cranky actor who's sort of like, at the end of his career, typecasting, and and who's kind of like, a little cynical about shit and whatever. But and the writer just gave him these wonderful lines. And then when people started laughing, it's like this surge came through me. Oh my God, this is cool.
Well, I'm actually curious, what's one of your favorite plays? Because you've been so involved in theater throughout your life.
The plays that I love, I love doing Beckett. Of course, I love doing Shakespeare. Pinter is like really at the top of the list. All these heavy, but even with Beckett and Pinter, and with Shakespeare, they were great comic writers. There is great comedy in their stuff. That sort of leavening, where even the most serious moments, there's an irony there. There's a distance and there's a subtext that these writers gave to their characters.
Well, I think that's part of human nature.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the darkest times, even when my dad was dying, like we all cracked jokes, and my dad cracked a couple of jokes, like human beings, So, yeah. Is there any kind of book that you think all aspiring actors or directors or entertainers should read, like some penultimate thing that you think that we should all?
Not really. They're great books. There are really great books from Stanislavski on. But the thing about acting and studying acting and learning acting and practicing acting is that it's experiential. You can get a lot out of books, but there's a limit, because in the end, an actor, it's about acting, and it's about getting out there and doing it. When I got the job at USC and I had to create this MFA program, believe me, I went back to books. I went back to a lot of books and found some wonderful stuff. But in the end, it's like getting into a room with other people and beginning to work.
When I talk to different people about travel on the podcast, we often talk about physical travel being, out in the world, on planes and on trains. But I want to talk to you a bit about emotional travel, about the experience of traveling through our human lives. You are currently 78, correct?
Yep.
How do the challenges we are facing today compare to those of the past? Because I think we live longer lives now, but the question is, do you think we live better ones?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know. I mean, I do know that personally, I was deeply unhappy as a kid, deeply unhappy, confused as a young man, confused and angry, very angry.
Yeah.
And then over the years, through my relationship with Irene, with my kids, with the experience of trying to make a living in a very difficult business, and accepting my limitations, accepting what I have no control over, I've come to a place of relative peace and equanimity. I feel okay. I feel okay about myself. I feel okay about my relationships. But yet, the world is facing. I think. I mean, the cliche is the existential threat of global warming. But it's more than a cliche. It's a reality. We are killing ourselves in terms of, from my point of view, from our unfettered reliance on free markets, on unregulated capitalism. And people who feel that that's just some kind of like lefty, socialist bullshit is like, it's what we're doing to our resources and to our quality of living because we want to keep our gross national product, up there and growing at 2 and 3% of these percentages. It's meaningless. Meanwhile, the gap between the rich and the poor, I mean, which Bernie is laid out, accurately. It's not just socialist cant.
Yeah, I agree.
It's true that, that a small percentage of people own a majority of the wealth. And where does that leave people who are at the bottom?
Yeah. It's really fucked up
It
right now.
is. It's really frightening.
What were the main differences for you between the decades of your life, do you think? Like, have your priorities changed a lot since you were, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, et cetera?
That's a difficult question because, it's kind of like saying, have you changed a lot? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, I have changed in terms of my peace of soul. I'm finding a peace in my life and an acceptance and an understanding of perhaps what I'm doing here. But on the other hand, as I said to you at the beginning of our conversation today, is that I'm still dealing with the same problems. I'm still
Hmm.
dealing with my anger. I'm still dealing with my emotional confusion. But it's at another level. Now it's the confusion of like, why are people not seeing what is good for all of us?
Yeah.
That basically that greed taken to its absolute limit is it just kills us all.
I mean, I will say there is a lot of hope I'm seeing in this youngest generation. I think they are seeing it, and I think they look at it going, "The fuck is that? That's dumb." And I am seeing them be very inspired to, be more accepting of each other. So I have hope for the
Well, see,
future.
I
I
do
really
too, and
do.
that's Bernie's constituency. I
Yeah.
mean, those, I mean, it's like people my age. I mean, forget about it. It's like we're operating from old models. We can't let go of certain belief systems that no longer work, that no longer promote the general welfare.
Yeah.
It's like it's sad, but it's true. We are, and the conservatism of say my generation is not helpful. It really isn't helpful.
Andy, are you happy with the overall journey of life?
I accept. I don't know about happiness. I am happy for the most part. But happy, it's so funny. Happy is such a funny word. I am happy. I am unhappy. It's so weird. I think of it more about peace. There's a peace,
Hmm.
that I'm not in conflict with myself. I'm not at war with myself. I'm not at war with the people who are close to me. I'm not in conflict. That's what I feel I've made the progress with.
I think that's beautiful. If you could continue to stay healthy, how long would you actually like to live if you could put a number on it?
Yeah. You're talking to a guy who's been beset with fucking sciatica for the past during the rains here, and
Oh, dude, I had it. I had it a few years ago. I was going to put something in the refrigerator, and I just turned, and boom! I fell to the ground screaming, and the whole left side of my body.
so I mean, I mean, I won't let sciatica,
Yeah,
check me out. But as long as I can stay healthy, as long as I can stay healthy and functioning. But I don't want, but when I start to go seriously, no extraordinary measures, please. Send me to cloud cuckoo land and with my best wishes.
would you like to make it to 100?
No, I don't know. That's it's kind of meaningless to me. It really.
Yeah.
The reason that's meaningless to me is because I am finally learning to live in the moment. This is
Mm.
something I've been, I dropped acid and smoked a lot of dope and read Baba Ram Das and did, Om Shanti and all of that shit for years and years and, going to one, metaphysical actually went to the entire fucking metaphysical supermarket and went up and down the aisles pulling out this and that and this and that and this and that. But finally, I realized the simple truth is is the past is past. That's done. That's done. The future, who the hell knows? Who the hell knows? The only thing that is real to me at this point is like sitting here in this very comfortable chair, having a pleasant conversation with Daniel Sherrill.
Oh, thank you.
That's
Ditto.
the only thing that's real right now. That's it.
If you don't mind me asking, are you afraid of dying?
No, I'm not.
That's
I
cool.
don't want to die in pain. I'd
Yeah.
like not to have a long, protracted, painful death.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not afraid because that's,
The inevitable.
it is. And the thing, you see, the thing is also is at my age, it's like with people, Renee. I mean, this past year, I've lost 6 to 8 people
Yeah, I'm
who
sorry.
have
man.
meant a lot to me,
Yeah.
who I've had serious relationships with.
What do you hope to pass on to your kids and the rest of the world?
I
What's
hope
your
I hope enough money that will help them out, and I mean that. That whatever savings I have, that they won't all get wiped out. I do. Like, for instance, Rachel has this little boy who just turned 4, Willie Cosmo.
Great
Yeah,
name.
and he's named after my father, Willie. And he's a beauty. He's a beauty. I hope that he will remember Irene and me as being these positive forces in his life. That at this point, it's so funny. It's important to both of us that we live long enough so that we have our influence, that we become part of his totality as a person.
Well, what do you, at 78 and having had this glorious life and this career and a wonderful marriage and all that stuff, what are you most passionate about as a 70 or 8-year-old man?
Having good shit in the morning.
I'm passionate about that at 48.
Oh, man, that's important. No, I'm passionate. A couple of things. There are a couple of things. Irene and I both want to clean up, clean closets, clean files, clean the garage. Get rid of stuff. So we're not going to leave a lot of dead junk. Kids have to go through and cite, and burden them with. And the other thing is that I'm passionate about keeping my focus in the moment, and whatever comes along. Like right now, I realize that since this sequestration, because of the virus, is going to go on, I'm now thinking about a project. I really need to have a yoga, whether it be a continuation of the memoir, where I left off, whether it be, more about my experience at USC, because that was creating that program and running that program and teaching in it for these years was really so invaluable, and working with these young people who really renewed me and made me, I learned more from them than they ever learned from me. I know that's true.
And by the way, we should give a quick shout out to Danny Larson on the podcast, because she is the one that actually introduced us years ago, and it's thanks to her that we're friends.
I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I love her so much.
Yeah, me too. Hi, Danny.
She came to the play. She came to the last performance of the play that I did. I mean, she kills me, that girl.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah. Andy, so to summarize, though, you are passionate about shitting, cleaning, and writing. You and I are brothers in arms. Do you have a favorite childhood book?
Yeah, I think, I love the adventures. I love the Robert Louis Stevenson. My favorite stuff to read when I was a kid, the first books I can remember, and they're not really books. They were classic comics. Classic comics were the ones where they did the Iliad and the Odyssey and all of that, and I so love them. Oh my God. They really took me to another place.
What was the first book you read or movie you saw that made you cry, that you remember, that really got to you?
Oh, this is so funny. First thing comes to my mind. I was in a Hartford movie theater, and it was probably when I was 7 or 8 years old. I loved going to the movies. I knew how to sneak into all the Hartford movies. I remember all the names of the Hartford movies. the Crown and the Lowe's Poli and the Lowe's Poli Palace and the Strand and I remember the guys who were the managers and one of whom this guy at the Crown, which was the local theater, a little funky little theater, and he would kind of look the other way when I'd be sneaking in. I mean, I would stay there forever, and I loved film noir and that. No, but the biggest memory I ever had from that period is that my mother would occasionally go with me, and she would always fall asleep. So we went to the Strand and in this movie called The Thing, and so we walked in there, and I always bought a big bag of popcorn and all the junk I could stuff into my gob, and so I'm sitting there, and I'm full, and then The Thing, and this movie was really tense, so I'm just sort of like throwing shit in because this movie is scary. My mother's next to me snoring and whatever. And then the moment comes when James Arness as the Thing. It's about these stupid scientists up in the North Pole or someplace.
They remade it with John Carpenter.
That's right,
yeah.
right. So, and then finally, the Thing defrosts and breaks through the Quonset wall, and I barfed. You want to talk about projectile barfing? I mean, it all came out of me, all over. And thank God I was in the front row, so I wasn't barfing anymore. Ma. She said, what do you want? What do you want? What the hell's going on? What? I said, Ma, we got to move. She said, what? And she said, oh, for Christ's sakes, what have you done now? So she grabs me by the hand, and she's going to pull me out of the theater. I said, no, we're not leaving. We're not leaving. So we sat in the back. I insisted we sit in the back. And then these poor ushers who were at the end of the show are going to see all this puked up popcorn and M&M. So that's my memory. I mean, it's not a terribly sentimental one, but
if you could tell your younger self anything now, what would you do?
oh dear, I'd hold him dearly. Tell him it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. This too shall pass.
Do you have a favorite food?
Well, anything that Irene makes. So the last thing she made was this fabulous turkey chili. That was so excellent. But anything Irene makes is my favorite food.
So she's like my mother. She's like a good Jewish cook,
she's
right?
She's fabulous. She really is.
That's awesome. Yeah. If you hadn't been an artist, Andy, what do you think you would have done?
It's a good question. I think probably would have been a teacher. That's what I thought I was going to be. That, and I was also thinking about going into newspaper work, becoming a reporter. Briefly, and this is pretty funny, pretty ironic. I briefly thought of going into the diplomatic corps, and it's funny. The irony is that being the most undiplomatic person
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure that would have been a good fit.
That would not have been a good fit.
If you got a call that they were going to do a Deep Space Nine movie or whatever, so you don the old makeup. Minute.
I love that character. I loved playing him.
Andy, what do you think is the purpose of art?
To make us recognize our humanity. I mean, to put a mirror up to nature, to show us ourselves as we are, and to help us become better.
Beautiful. What does success in life look like to you?
It's success in life is again that peace, the peace, and acceptance. And learning to accept the moment, whatever that moment may be.
What's your spirit animal?
Wolf.
Nice. Why is that?
Don't know, but I love wolves. I've always had a thing for wolves.
Well, the last thing that I do with all the people that I interview is a game I have called 299 Philosophical and Life Questions with Moonbird. And normally I ask people to pick two numbers, and then I read them those two questions. But I'm going to have you read all 299.
No!
But you get to pick two numbers from 1 to 299, and I'm going to ask you those questions randomly, and we'll see what we get. So what are your two numbers?
13 and 250.
All right. 13. I already asked this. How do you define success? So you got that one. Give me another one.
Oh, 250.
Besides 250, give me another one.
79.
79 and 250. Here we go. Okay. Scrolling. 79.
You really have that many? Wow.
I do. I take this shit seriously.
Wow.
Well, I'm going to read it, but we already know the answer, which is what is or was your longest relationship? And that would probably be Irene.
There
right?
it is.
Unless there's someone else you hung out with longer than 50 years.
Well, there are a couple of people I've known longer than her, but I mean, that's the longest relationship, really.
Who is the person you've known the longest that's still alive with you today?
It's still alive is my friend Norman Klein, I think. He was my college roommate at the University of New Hampshire.
Well, hello, Norman Klein out there, wherever you are. All right, 250. This is such a bullshit question. But anyway, Andy, how are you really?
Daniel, I'm really okay.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Andy Robinson, thank you so much for being on this podcast. As always, it is great to talk with you. And I wish you and Irene the best during all this corona nonsense, and you guys stay safe.
It was a lot of fun, man. Really a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. And have a great day.
Okay.
Friends and listeners, if you'd like some more Moonbird in your life, and hey, who wouldn't? Head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media, you know where, at Memories of a Moonbird.